Hello, Fangoria fans, and welcome to Fangoria's end of the year wrap up. I'm going to have everybody introduce ourselves because you're looking at the Fangoria editorial staff here. So we're going to kick off with Phil, our leader in chief.
Hello, leader in chief. Oh, can we change my title to leader in chief? I like this 2025, baby. Leader in chief, editor in chief, I guess. Hey, it's cool to be here with y'all. I don't think we've all the four of us have sat and talked together ever. So this is
No,
Never.
exciting.
I don't think so,
I'm
no.
hoping, yeah, that we can keep this going. We'll see how this one goes. But this was a pretty cool, let's just get the whole editorial team together, all the horror nerds in one place. So, yeah. Angel.
Hello, I'm Angel. I am the digital editor. Some people don't know what that means. I'm coming to realize it means I run the website. So I'm basically what Phil does for the magazine. I kind of do that for the website. Take me to your leader in chief. Yes.
Yes. And Amber T.
Woo!
Hello. I am Fangoria's resident Brit on the editorial team, head news writer and staff writer as well.
And my name is Rebecca McKendry. I am director of special projects here, but that means within that I drift from doing editorial stuff to doing outside projects to books to movies. I kind of am all over the place across the board. But again, the whole conceit was to get all of the hyper horror nerds in one place to talk about 2024 and kind of wrap it up, what we saw, what we love. So I'm going to kick off with kind of the biggest question is, what trends did we see? Like a lot of times when you're looking back at specific years and specific decades, you can kind of point and say like, there was a lot of slashers. It was a lot of IP reboots. So what did you guys see in 2024?
I'll say I feel like we're going, we're shifting towards back to what I just use as a blanket term, fun horror. We were kind of in this very like grief, tragedy stricken kind of vibe for a while. And I enjoy that stuff. It's fun. But my favorite shit is the fun shit. So we've kind of taken this shift now to where it's like we're getting gory body horror. People are doing kind of surprising things. That's the one thing I noticed when I sat down to make my list for this year. And as I'm writing about each entry, I was like, every one of these, it's because it surprised me in one way or another. But
Mhm.
a lot of it is it's shifting towards gory, experimental, and just fun.
I think gore, especially, I think the last few years we've kind of seen this. I hate to use the term like metaphora, but people like it. But yeah, with like things like Terrifier 3, The Substance, it's like big gory splatter seems to be coming back again, and I'm here for it.
Totally. I would agree with all of that. And then I guess the thing that surprises me is that slashers are still going. Like we've had this weird slasher renaissance that has, I think at this point, going on longer than the original slasher subgenre in the 80s. It's still going and people are finding interesting new ways to kind of engage with it beyond just the terrifier of it all. Like you've got In a Violent Nature and it's metastasizing in weird ways, which I think the original run of slasher films never really had a chance to do. So it's kind of exciting in that regard if you're a slasher fan. If you're not a slasher fan, maybe hang in there and it'll keep evolving into something you are on board with. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm permanently confused every single time I see a new slasher film come out because sometimes it feels like they're trying to mix it up like In a Violent Nature did, but other times it just feels so like this could have come out in 1984 or again in 1999 and it totally would have worked in any of the time periods. So I'm going to circle back to slashers in a sec. This is one of the first years as of recent where I felt like we had this major seismic shift in horror where I did feel like in prior years to this that we were getting what I lovingly called trauma porn, where it was all about like my family is dead and here is the repercussions of it. Like I felt like that movie was happening over and over largely by A24. But this year, we were still getting these kind of traumatic backstories, but they were being presented in this different, fun way. And now I'm going to throw a theory at y'all. So when you're in academic horror, there is this constant belief that any major trends that emerge is because of something that happened. And so it's the basic idea that if something traumatic happens to the nation, we will see everything get hyper violent, even in a fun way. So it's like if you look post like Vietnam War, that's when we get Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes and Texas Chainsaw Massacre and things get hyper violent. We look post 9/11, that's when we get the torture porn cycle. So is this the result of pandemic, political strife? Like, are we shifting back to hyperviolence because of some type of, we're working some shit out internally?
All of the above. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like especially there's been a lot of films about specifically forced birth this year. Things like Immaculate, the first Omen, even something like Cuckoo. And this all comes into play with this kind of not resurgence, because it never really stopped, but women losing basic autonomy rights. And we're seeing that reflected a lot in horror, I think, as well. So, that's a pretty big political thing that's going on.
There was so much mother-based horror, even in surprising ways. They took Evil Dead Rise and turned it into like such a fun franchise, and they managed to put a sort of a motherhood subtext on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's and not to plug our competitors, but there's a great article that Julianne Stapidis wrote for Bloody Disgusting about how the slasher movement is a result of the pandemic, which honestly I'm grateful for. I'm so glad that we're not just watching pandemic movies.
I feel like that is kind of the natural cathartic response, is like we were all trapped in rooms for, a year and a half. I don't want to watch room horrors anymore. I want to see shit get weird. And that's, I think that Angel hit it with like the biggest thing that I've seen this year is I've seen what are basically at their core, not to insult them, very standard stories. Like Strange Darling, very standard horror story, but it's told in such a way that it completely surprised me. That it did something much, much different with it. So I'm now going to move into a trend that I saw. Did you guys notice a lot of time loop horrors this year?
Now that you mention it.
Time Cut, Caddo Lake. There was another one that Elric and I saw. And then even outside the horror space as well, because My Old Ass was one. Like it felt like that was one of the trends where I was like, I swear I've seen at least 4. And maybe it was because I watched Time Cut, Caddo Lake, and Things Will Be Different all within the same week. And then I was like, what's happening here? Why are we doing this? It's cool. I mean, I loved Things Will Be Different. I thought Caddo Lake did something really cool. But suddenly I was like, why? Why the time loops?
Time Cut, I have to put an asterisk on there because that's been done for it's on the shelf, finished. It really was ahead of most of this curve. But yeah, and I think Cuckoo kind of falls into this category as well.
Yeah.
A lot of those have kind of a coming of age element to them as well, which is coming of age is like my shit. So when we have coming of age and horror, I'm like so happy. But a lot of those time loop ones involve a little coming of age story thrown in there as well.
100%. Okay, so let's talk about Immaculate versus First Omen. Because anytime we end up with anything that is so similar back to back, like when we end up with Repo the Genetic Opera and the Repo Man, or when we end up with Deep Impact and Armageddon at the same time, I'm like, what happened in the zeitgeist? Why did we suddenly feel like meteors were coming? And sometimes I feel like it's as simple as one copied the other. Like if we look at the 1989 aquatic horror craze, it was everybody knew Abyss was coming and everybody rushed to make like fucked up sea monsters before it got here. But I don't think that is the case with Immaculate and First Omen. But the plots are so similar. Forced birth. What happened and how do we feel about them?
I will say The First Omen is one of my favorite movies of the year, but I saw that early, and then Immaculate shifted their release date and Immaculate came out first. So I went to the theater to see Immaculate and I was like, oh fuck. And I was a little bit worried for The First Omen because I was like, I don't know how the general public, like I'm thinking about like when I say general public, I think about like my parents going to the movies or something. I don't know how they're going to feel about going to see Immaculate and then like the next week going to see The First Omen. And I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, oh, this copied this. I'm like, that's not how that works. That's not what happened. But I think they both did quite well. I think people enjoyed both of them and didn't give them too much shit. But yeah, The First Omen, that is like my soapbox. It's one of my favorites of the year.
See, I was the alternate. Like I deeply appreciated First Omen on a cinematography level. Like I loved how it looked. It was doing some super weird shit, but I loved how fucking off the chain Immaculate was. Like I just loved how just bonkers it got, like no holds barred.
I think First Omen stole Immaculate's thunder, and Immaculate kind of got diminished by how much people loved the First Omen, which I will give full credit to the First Omen for smuggling in something completely original under what in the trades looked like a piece of shit. Like, oh, you're doing an Omen prequel, really? And so the fact that it was any good at all is like amazing. But Arkasha Stevenson did a incredible job about it. But I love the DNA, no pun intended, of Immaculate and how it's spoilers if anybody hasn't seen it, but it's not even a supernatural story. It's almost science fiction. And I just really vibed with that so much. And the fact that the filmmaker hadn't really done a lot of horror. Like he came out of some other space. You know, I love when somebody kind of rolls into our genre and just kind of does something really original and outside the box about it. And there's like a weird 70s Italian needle drop in that movie that I was like, oh my God, when they're like doing the laundry or something.
Oh yeah.
But I think First Omen edged Immaculate out for me slightly, only because I really wanted to see that kind of story told by a female filmmaker. And I thought the visuals in First Omen, you know, that the claw scene, chef's kiss. I thought Nell Tiger 3 was amazing. Like, I think that was the first time I'd seen her in anything, and I was like blown away. I can't wait to see more from her. And Arkasha too. They're both great.
And I can't believe it's her first feature. Arkasha's like, that's her like feature
Right?
directorial debut. And I was like, how?
You know, she had been directing all of those TV shows with Nick Antosca,
Channel Zero.
and they're
Yeah.
all so cinematic. Like none of it is actually shot like a television show. It's all super, super cinematic. So immediately I was like, oh, she's got this. Like she knows exactly what she's doing, just because that's such a beautiful stomping ground to get started in. Okay, so IP. You know, when I was looking back at 2023, it was largely dominated by IP, and 2022. That's what we mostly saw, were kind of these reboots or the screams coming back. This year, we didn't have as much. It was a lot of new stuff coming into play, which is like my favorite time of horror. But that said, what IP did you see that you dug?
I was blown away by Terrifier 3. I appreciated Terrifier and Terrifier 2, but I was not like the biggest fan. But when I saw Terrifier 3, I was like, this is so funny. This is the funniest film I've ever seen. And you know, now I'm like, I can see the appeal in that kind of franchise now. And it's all because of Art the Clown, his little Santa hat.
I love that with Art the Clown, my 8-year-old son knows who he is, has never seen any of the movies. And it reminds me so much of like Freddy Krueger or Jason when I was a kid, where it like just transposes the idea of having to see the movie or being a fan of the franchise, that they just become icons without even having the movie in tow, just by the nature of the film. So it's beautiful.
This is maybe a sideways answer to your question about IP, but I kind of wasn't kidding about Nosferatu, because I think we've seen for the last 18 months the same parent company trying to figure out Dracula in a weird kind of side. How do we come at Dracula in a new way? Renfield, nope. Demeter, nope. Abigail, nope. And then you get this sort of opulent kind of like throwbacky version of the bootleg version of Dracula with Nosferatu, and that's the one that's going to hit. I think we don't care about IP. It depends who's driving the bus.
Yeah. I think that that's a really good observation, because last year when I was looking back at my top 10 list from last year, I was lukewarm on a lot of the IP from last year. I liked the new Alien Romulus, but it was not strong enough that I would have even put it on my top 15. It was still, I watched it and walked away and went, that was cool, but it was not Evil Dead Rise. Angel, thoughts on IP?
I have to piggyback on what Amber said. Like, I am not by any means the target audience for the Terrifier films. I appreciate them for everything they do, and I'm just kind of, like Phil said, I'm blown away, like, of what they've managed to do. Like, we haven't had a slasher icon of that size and magnitude since the Freddys and the Jasons, and like, people have been trying and it just hasn't caught. But for some reason, like, they've managed to just explode onto the scene and people go fucking nuts. You go to a convention, the longest lines are for the Terrifier people, and you see a million Art the Clowns, and you'll see a 5-year-old and a 45-year-old. You know, it's the craziest thing. Like, Art the Clown just transcends. But I will say Terrifier 3, I had a blast watching that. I mean, we also all watched it together at Fantastic Fest, but I love Christmas horror. I love that he was able to elevate things a little bit. I like that he kind of took a chainsaw as a little fuck you to some of the flack he's been getting about, like, well, you do it this way and this way. So he literally took a chainsaw and just said, fuck that, and showed us that that's not what it is. So
same. I am not the target audience for those movies. I watch them with my teenage daughter, and she's like, yes, that's it. I love them. And Elric and I remember we went to see Terrifier 2 together, and it was just kind of like I don't get it, but I appreciate it. And I felt the same through Terrifier 3, except for the cold open with Chrissy. Oh my God, that rocked. I love that cold open. That
was hard to watch, though. I've never had that experience of watching a cold open of somebody that, like, I love in real life just being brutally massacred on the screen. And I told her afterwards, I was like, I kind of wanted to cry. Like, it didn't feel good watching.
Oh. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears and I'm going to talk about my number one cold open of the year. Can we just talk about Oddity for a second, y'all? Because
the biggest surprise of the year.
Whoa, oh my God. That first 15 minutes, I will show that later of an example of how to do a good cold open. And it literally did wanted nothing. Like that was the thing, is you saw nothing. It was all just conversation, but it just slapped across the board. So thoughts on Oddity?
Oddity, we started Overlook. It was such a surprise. And I'd seen Caveat, and I liked Caveat, Damien McCarthy's first film, but Oddity had cranked up the fun level and the accessibility level to it. It felt like an EC comic brought to life. I walked out thinking, I want to watch a weekly series where the blind psychic antiques dealer solves murders.
Right?
I want to see her every week.
It had one specific jump scare that I swear took like 5 years off my life. I can't even watch Caveat. Caveat scares me too much. I think Damien McCarthy is like, and it's this whole like Irish horror thing. I think Irish horror filmmakers really have this amazing grasp on storytelling and this kind of world building. Because when I was watching Oddity, I was like, yeah, I fully believe that wooden man is sentient, and all of this stuff could really happen, and I was terrified.
I have to confess, I turned it on at nighttime. Like I was getting in bed and I was like, okay, I'll put this on, I have this to watch. I turned it off almost immediately because I was too fucking scared, and I was like, I have to finish this in the morning. I'm like, the anxiety level, I was like, I'm in bed starting to have like anxiety sweats, and I'm thinking about all these horrible things. So I turned it off, turned it back on immediately in the morning because I was so excited to get back to it, and it just blew me away. It was horrifying. And then just like the imagery of that wooden man, I can see it right now perfectly. Yep. But the fact that he's just there and you're just waiting because you don't know what's going to happen, and something about just that tension level of seeing the thing in the screen, and it's just ramping up, but just horrifying. And I loved it.
Speaking of stuff coming out of the UK, stop motion was another one for me this year where I was like, I'd never seen anything like it. I was not expecting it, and I loved it so much. Yeah.
I'm a nerd for stop motion, just like the art of stop motion. So I was like, okay, I was very excited to sit down and watch that movie. And I had never seen stop motion done with like meat and things like that. So I was like, what the fuck? It was like blending this like very wholesome thing from childhood and making it like the most horrific version of it. And then the story between the mother and the daughter, that was a beautifully brilliant movie.
Okay, so let's go into some of our favorite deep cuts of the year. Like, what are some of the ones that you felt like, could have hit with a bigger audience, deserve an extra look? I'm going to kick us off with Mads, because I'm not a zombie person. It's just not, I love them. I will still watch them. I will still pick zombie films over a romantic comedy any day of the week, but it is not the subgenre that I will immediately gravitate towards. But that movie, I just had a blast with it because it was just nonstop. Like it felt like I was on those drugs and just riding with it the whole time. So I really enjoyed that one. So if you've not seen Mads yet, that was definitely one of my highlights this year.
I will say, just as a subgenre, horror comedy, I love. And for some reason, it did not land this year. Like people were not about the horror comedy. And I don't know if it's just people didn't give it a chance or they didn't like it. Like it kind of bombed at the box office. I don't know if people went to like if people actually sat down to try and watch Abigail. I thought that's one of my favorites of the year. That was incredible.
Mine too. Yeah, I thought it was so
silence
fun.
When they're not doing IP and they're just kind of unleashed to do their own original thing is like when they're at their absolute best, and they're just so fucking good at it. Like if you like Ready or Not, sit down and watch Abigail. Also, The Coffee Table, was that this year?
Oh my God. I loved The Coffee Table so much. And that's where I'm confused because I feel like I saw it in 2023.
Right.
I think it was at like festivals last year, but I think wide release.
It's this year. Okay. Yeah. So I was scared to watch that one because of everything that everyone was saying. And I was like, I don't know if that's really my jam. It was 100% my jam. I was laughing. I don't know if you're supposed to laugh at it, but it was just so deeply uncomfortable that you laugh.
No, because I heard the concept and somebody had to tell me that it was not trauma porn because that was my first instinct is like, oh, it's trauma porn. And it's far from it.
And I want to give Amber a shout out for writing 3 pages in the magazine about The Coffee Table without telling you what happens in it. Which is hard.
Yeah, that was hard. That was every time I see it. It's one of those films where I'm like, I don't want to tell people that I'm talking about this film because if they look it up, they're gonna think I'm a maniac. I'm like, yeah, I love this film. And then it's one of those films where if you tell anyone anything about it, you spoil the whole thing for them. So that was hard. I had to introduce it as at a festival, give a trigger warning without saying what I'm giving a trigger warning for. It was hard work. Kai Casas, you're a maniac, and I love it.
My underseen ones that I would want to shine a light on, I put one of them on the damn cover of the magazine, but it's Larry Fessenden's Blackout. I know he's an acquired taste, but to me, he's a precious national resource, and we're only going to get so many Larry Fessenden movies, and he's playing songs in a key that nobody else is. And it's a deeply felt film about alcoholism and father-son nonsense. So it was like, give me all that you got. And I think it's William Hurt's son in the lead. And they do something really special with the casting. And I know Dark Sky is the distributor. I don't know where it's streaming yet, but it's really worth a look. And then the other one that just made me need to go take a shower and lie down was Red Rooms.
Okay, this has been a mixed one because that was Elric's #1 film of the year. And I walked away from it and went, okay. It felt like the horror was happening off screen. Like the entire story, I was just feeling the echoes of what could have been a horror movie, but we were not given that. We were just kind of given this adjacent story to where the action was. Okay, y'all. So let's round this out with our top films of the year. So just hit me with some of your faves. And I will say they don't have to be films as well, because I'm going to lead with Alan Wake 2. Was like co-opted weeks of my life, and I loved it.
If we're going games, Silent Hill 2. I gotta give a shout out to Silent Hill 2 remake.
Good. Oh my gosh,
I fully ate my words. I was all over that Twitter saying they can't do it, it's gonna be crap. I hold my hands up. Bloober team, you proved me so wrong. It was so good. Loved it.
Hey, what else?
I don't have any video games. I'll say The Substance, the first Omen, and Nosferatu, I think, are probably my top 3 of the year.
For me, Cuckoo's near the top. Like, it's rare that I watch a movie where I have no idea what's going to happen next, but also can't wait to see what happens next. Yeah. Just a total original. And we spent 3 hours the next day talking about it, which never happens. I don't know. That one was really special for me. Long Legs I liked as well, but I gotta just shout out beyond Long Legs. If I'm going to put something at the top of 2024, it's Neon's marketing. They made the marketing its own entity that you engaged with, separate from the film in its own way, right? And then, you know, there are going to be people that complain, well, then the movie can't live up to the hype, but they made hype its own art form, I think. And that's exciting, because if you've been doing this long enough, you know that marketing is sort of like thuddingly literal and boring, and they spill too much stuff, that they're able to creatively market a film again, and by doing so, forcing other people to follow suit, I think is very exciting.
Have to give a shout out to Heretic. That was probably #1 film of the year.
How did we not mention Heretic yet? Good
I know.
We were eating this year.
I have a list. Okay. Any other like big major, oh my God, this is awesome releases that we have missed that we have to give some love to?
I have to give a shout out to I Saw the TV Glow, which I know a lot of people don't class as horror, but I think it definitely has horror elements. I love Jane Schoenbrunn. I'm a huge fan of their first film, World's Fair. And so when I was watching TV Glow, I was like, oh my God, so a lot of the experiences obviously relate to trans youth, which I personally wasn't, but a lot of the nostalgia experiences and, you know, growing up lonely and not knowing how to connect with people aside from through like TV shows or fandom or whatever. I was watching it and I was like, I've seen it like a few times now. Every time I'm bursting into tears.
I have to give a shout out to Speak No Evil, because the original one did that to me, where it left me feeling horror for the next 3 days, to the point that I was like, I will never watch this film again. But going into it and laughing and seeing what a strong left-hand turn they did with it, but how successful it was in its own form. So that was one of my surprise, I loved it, movies of the year. Okay, really quick before we wrap up, any major horror TV moments of the year that we have to touch on? Because I have to give a shout out to Hysteria, because that was, I was born during the Satanic Panic. So like the first couple of years of my life were watching all of the neighborhood kids listen to Ozzy. Like, this is me being baby dad.
I lived through the Satanic Panic, and the side of my high school had a spray painted graffiti on it that said "Satin Rules."
It
Spelled
does.
it wrong. Yeah. Yeah, What We Do in the Shadows is still surprising me with how it's like, it's not falling back on its own stuff. It's taking things into new spaces every season, and they're still killing it. So Check that out.
The creep tape.
Right.
Please.
Oh,
I almost blew poor Phil's eardrums out at Fantastic Fest when Mark Duplass and Patrick Bryce came on stage for the 3 episodes of the Creep tapes. I am such a huge fan of Creep and Creep 2 and Peach Fuzz and Duplass and Bryce. And I just thought it was like, how do you improve on those 2 films? Like, where do you go next with this character? And they nailed it. You know, these little episodic, these little chunks, these little nuggets where you kind of get an insight into this complete maniac. He's funnier than ever. Duplass is like having the best time of his life. I hope they make another 1,000 seasons of it because I'm obsessed. It was amazing. So funny.
you know that like when you see old footage of teenagers watching the Beatles and they're screaming their heads off and like going into hysterics, that was legit Amber at the Creep tapes. It was fantastic.
Okay, y'all. So really quick, things you are most looking forward to in 2025. Just throw them out.
28
The
years
Monster
later.
Renaissance.
28 years later for sure. And this is a cheat because I've seen it, but wait till you guys see Companion. Companion's another first feature from somebody, and it's just gonna blow your minds. It's so good. And it's in the winter issue. We covered a little bit. I had to pull the Amber of like writing about it without telling you what happens in it. But it's a real fun one, and there's gonna be a lot of conversation about it.
I'm really looking forward to, and this, I think all of you have seen it, but it's one that everybody has told me would have been my #1 film of the year, but I did not receive the screening link until yesterday. Dead Talent Society.
Oh, so good.
Yeah. So I
So
just
good.
got the screening link yesterday. So right now I'm
So
like,
fun.
I'm gonna watch that tonight. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's
I'm very excited
fun.
to rewatch that one because I was watching
Mhm.
it at like a midnight screening at the very end of like Fantastic Fest when you're half of a human, you know, just like a shell there. But that was one of my favorite things that I saw. So I'm very excited to rewatch it and I'm excited for it to have a wide release.
I'm excited for Frankenstein. I want to see Jacob Elordi as the creature. Very, very ready for that. I'm also excited to see, I'm not going to say anything. Obviously, Nosferatu comes out in the UK. So for my people, it's a next year release. But I'm excited to see the online discourse around Bill's look because I think there's going to be some very funny reactions to it. And I can't wait.
Okay, well, hopefully we will join again in early January to talk about kind of what's coming in 2025. But hey, y'all, it's been a hell of a year. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. And
See you
thank
next year.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Also,
Thank
you can see on the
you.
Fangoria website, there's a big, beautiful list of all the horror movies coming in 2025. Just throwing that out there.
Ooh, hell yes. Okay, I got to hit that before we have our next convo. So thank you, everybody. Have an awesome holiday.
you.